Well, again, good morning. It's great to see all of you here this morning on this beautiful day the Lord has given us. That question asked at the end of that little film there, God is speaking, are we listening? We're going to dive a little deeper into that today as we look at listening to God. Do we listen or do we make excuses? Which one's easier? The excuse part, right? It's much, much easier. And we see that in every facet of life, whether it's work or whether it's, our health. There's a million different things. We ended last week with Moses kind of in a dilemma. All right, God has spoken to him. He's made it very clear that you are the one that's going to go to Pharaoh. I'm sending you. You're my guy. You're the one that's going to lead the people out as they are set free. But instantly we see this became a great issue for Moses. This became a real issue for him. Why? What was the hesitation? What was in the way? Will we listen to the call of God, or will we make excuses? And we know which one we tend to lean toward pretty quickly, but I want us to look at this because generally we start with the excuses, right? Isn't that what we begin with? We instantly gravitate toward, well, all the reasons why not. All the reasons I don't want to do that. All the reasons I can't do that, and on and so and on. So how can we get out of it? We're not able. We're not the right one. But what we have to consider is this, friends. Does God make mistakes? Does God make mistakes? If he called you to do something, he didn't make a mistake. If he called you to do something, he believes that you have the ability, the capability, the talent, the time, whatever the case. He didn't ask you if you could. He asked you if you would. And that's where all the difference is. Because if you will, he'll make a way. Amen? Can we believe that today? Can we believe that today? So we see here, when the situation seems difficult, the task seems too heavy, insurmountable, the mountain's too high to climb, the road's too long, whatever. We tend to hesitate, right? We tend to put on the brakes. We tend to look at all the reasons not to. But what I want us to understand is this. If there's no challenge, there's no growth, right? If there's no growth, there's no impact. And if there's no impact, there's no generations to keep it going. What we're doing right now matters. Now, it may seem insignificant in the eyes of some as we look about and say, well, we don't have enough, or we're this and that, all these different concepts of understanding, but little is much in the hands of God, amen? And so we see here, Moses is looking at it from, I can't do this. How am I going to do this? The same thing that we have struggles with, right? Every issue that comes about our way, every circumstance that comes, every difficult moment that comes, how am I going to do it? And when we can't figure out how I can do it, what do? I quit. Yeah, because it seems too big, it's too much, and on so. And so, a few things that I want us to consider this morning as we look at this moment. Moses was not fully understanding of everything in this time, right? He wasn't fully engaged in the entirety of his faith when it came to that moment. I mean, he was content, as we find right here in verse 1, that he was watching the sheep. He was okay with that, right? He was okay with doing that. He was okay with doing the family thing. And here's the other side of it. Moses is 80 years old. It's usually not the time we think about doing something new, right? Sometimes we hesitate to do it at 20, much less at 80, right? And so the idea of doing something new and doing something that's going to be difficult is probably not what's on our mind, right? We're not thinking along those ways. But here we find him. He is at the burning bush. He's in a conversation with God. Is God's timing our timing? Never. I mean, we can absolutely believe that. It never, ever works out that way because we don't always understand God's timing. If we really think about it, if we look over the course of our life, we just don't understand God's timing because it's never when we want it to be. But what we can believe this morning is God's timing has a purpose. Is God's timing always convenient? Well, of course not, right? Because that's how it works. We could philosophize that in a whole different kinds of ways, but at the end of the day, It's never about convenience. It's about availability, right? And so we see here Moses, again in verse 1, he's shepherding the flock of his father-in-law. So Moses is busy. He's got stuff going on. He probably has the mindset, can't somebody else do it? Have you ever been right in the middle of a project and somebody asks, hey, can you take care of this? And the very first thing that comes to your mind is, couldn't somebody else do that, including you? I mean, don't you see I'm busy? I got my hands, in this or that or whatever the case. But that's exactly sometimes when it's the most important. And we see in the midst of life, sometimes God is calling us out of situations or in situations that we think, well, I'm too busy. And God is saying, no, this is the perfect time. Because now you're wound up, man. You're ready to go. You've got all the tools that we need. It's so easy to get into that mindset of just let somebody else do it, because we become so consumed. And this is true for all of us. Just like in that little video of the lady watching the hecticness of life, right? We all get consumed by life. We get consumed by responsibilities and career paths and goals and all that stuff. And none of those are necessarily wrong. Okay, I want us to understand that none of those are, but they might not allow us to see there's something bigger. Imagine if all we had is right what's in front of you. Well, it's a limited scope, right? And this is all I've got, And again, we're not talking about materially. We're talking about the big path of life. If this is it, well, that kind of doesn't give us a whole lot of incentive and a whole lot of drive, right? We get consumed by the busy day and, I got to get up in the morning and do it all over again. And we got this and we got that. And, I just can't wait. Wake up in the morning, you're already looking for bedtime, because you're already tired before we ever get started, right? We get consumed by that because we can't see outside of that hectic nature that there's something else. And this is what God is trying to get Moses to understand. There is more. These people are in bondage. They don't have to stay that way. How many of us understand that sometimes we're in bondage? And God is saying to us, you don't have to stay that way. Because we become in bondage to so many different things, whether it's work or whether it's anxiety, all these different things continue to lock us in place, and we can't see outside of that. And God is saying here, you don't have to stay there. We can get you outside of that. I remember when God called me, I was right in the middle of my law enforcement career. It was the least convenient time possible. And I couldn't even imagine what was coming next, right? I had no idea what was happening. It was the furthest thing from my mind. I'm busy. Those two little words, right? Those two little words, it generally is a statement of fact. I'm actually doing something. Or it's a statement of, I don't want to be bothered. We've said it on both sides of that, right? We've all done. I'm busy right now, and that really the tone of that gives forth whether it's I'm actually busy or leave me alone. Okay, we've all been there. We've all said it. We've all had that. So sometimes it's valid. Sometimes it's an excuse. If I just don't want to be bothered with it, yeah, I'm busy right now. I don't have time. But actually, that's not true. I just don't want to. But we just don't want to say that part out loud because we don't want to hurt anybody or whatever the case. But sometimes that's just true. And honestly, I think as we go along in life, it's just better to be honest. I don't want to. That may not always fall on good ears, but that's just the truth, right? How's your schedule today? Think about this for a moment. I asked that while very, very often having to look in the mirror. Because I find myself, as time goes by and responsibilities grow and all the other aspects of life continue to pile on, I have to ask myself that question a lot. How's your schedule? What can you fit in? Can you add anything else on? And you're hoping the answer is no. Sometimes it can get absolutely overwhelming, but it absolutely is in the midst of that. A lot of times the last thing that we're thinking of is how to add something else on, right? How can I squeeze in another minute, or how can I go another mile, or whatever the case? But we can sometimes understand in the midst of trying to plan it all, sometimes we miss stuff because we're generally planning all around what we want to do, right? And we're not looking at the expanse. We're not looking at beyond that, because sometimes, and I know this is hard to hear, it's hard to hear for all of us, but sometimes we forget it's not all about us. Sometimes there's a bigger circle that we need to influence, and God is calling out to all who will listen rather than make excuses. I got something really, really great for you to take care of. In this particular case, Moses is like, oh yeah, I got a nation I need you to lead. Yeah, just a couple of million people, not a big deal, right? And so just, I need you to go out there and I need you to be my guy. I need you to go and do this. Well, I can't do that. I mean, I don't know how, and we'll look at that as we get a little bit. But do we listen? Or do we make excuses? And we know which one we fall on, right? But let's look through this. We spoke last week about knowing God's heart. He not only cares about us, friends, but he cares about all who still do not know him. You see, we forget about that because we gather together and, we enjoy the fellowship and we all get to know each other and we enjoy this time and it's great. But there are hundreds, maybe thousands of others outside of our doors that still don't know this message. And that's not being prideful or arrogant. Hey, we know everything. It's not about that. It's about, we want to see people set free. We don't want to see people in the drudges of life and trapped in this place and that place. We want to see people set free through the love of God, through the salvation of Christ, what he has given to us, what we've all sung about and everything here this morning. There are times we are called to be the vessel to reach them. We don't always understand that, and we oftentimes short ourselves because I'm not qualified or I don't know how or this, that. But look at what is being said here. In the case of Moses, he was saying, I need you to help me set people free. In a literal sense, in this case, Moses was busy when God called. Look at the disciples when Jesus called them. They were in the middle of doing their jobs, right? They were fishing or collecting taxes or doing, shepherding or whatever, all the different things that they were doing. When Jesus said, follow me, it was never to say that what you're doing is not important. I want you to understand that this morning. It was never God saying to Moses about shepherding or to Jesus to the disciples. It was never to say that what you're doing at this very moment is not important, but rather, I see value in your ability. I see value in your talents, and I've got an assignment for you. Will you go with me? Will you go with me and let's change a life? Think about that. Think about how incredible that is. Have you ever done something significant in your life? And again, this is not for any testimony time, and nobody has to stand up and share anything. But you knew, and again, not from an arrogant way, but you knew that word, that encouragement or something, it made that person's day better. That's a good feeling, Or you shared some positive information with somebody. That's a good feeling. I remember so many different times over the years, whether it was on the road or whether it was in ministry, speaking life into people. That because there are so many people that think that they don't have it anymore, right? That it's just over, that I'm done for. And here God is saying, will you go with me? Will you go with me and let's do something incredible? And let's do something that's going to make an impact forever. Can you imagine, the call on the disciples when Jesus said, follow me? Well, he's telling all of us that today, friends, every single one of us, when we consider it, when we consider the moment, then it changes the way that we look at life. It changes the way that we look at our assignment. And rather than grasping for excuses, we begin to feel honor. Wow, God called me. I think about that sometimes. Sometimes I get a little overwhelmed, I'll be honest with you, because I am the least qualified person that should be standing here. The least qualified. And the humbleness of this, that God has allowed me to do this for so long, through the ups and the downs, the goods and the bads. And he continues to allow me to do it. And even as I get older, look back and say, wow, there's this thing called wisdom as you get a little older, right? And you get a little bit better and a little bit this, a little bit that, and you understand the value of this. Here's what I want you to understand. God calls when we're busy. The enemy calls when we're sitting still. Because the enemy says, just stay there. Just stay there. Don't move. But what happens when we don't move? We get immobile. We get immobile, what happens? We don't go anywhere. And we become useless. Or at least we think so in our minds. And then we just sit there, and we sit there, and we think we're accomplishing nothing. That's exactly what he wants you to do. God is saying, I want to call you right now. When you've got the ability, when you've got the time, you've got the talent. You don't think you do, but I'm going to show you just how much you've got. I'm going to change your life, and I'm going to change the lives of others through you. See, while I'm busy, and to be honest, I mean, I'm busy, God, and I'm busy pastor, and I'm busy, my friend or whatever, but man, things aren't good right now. How many of us could say that and be honest? I've got this problem or that problem or family issues or health issues or financial, whatever. Okay, we can look all around us. We can see conflict and we can see corruption and we can see immorality. But look in verse 7, if you have your Bibles, God says, I have observed the misery of my people in Egypt and have heard them crying out because of their oppressors. I know about their sufferings. Okay, so things weren't good then, right? When God has called Moses, he's busy, and things were not really good. So there's another reason not to go. Okay, why? Everything's upside down, nothing's good. Earlier in life, Moses may have had a little bit of a different impact, right? He lived there at that time. He was in the system. He had a little stroke. He had a little power. But now, man, God, I'm old now, and I don't live there anymore. In fact, I'm not very popular over there anymore. They kind of don't like me now. I'm on the other side of the fence, if you will. He didn't seem or feel like he was in a position to accomplish very much. Have we ever felt that way? What could I do? Have you ever asked yourself that question? What could I do? Well, who am I? I couldn't do anything. I couldn't make a difference. I'm just one person. But again, do we listen or do we make excuses? You see, God didn't just send him to go. This is the beautiful part about it. Verse 12, he tells Moses, I will certainly be with you. How easy is it to forget that part when the task before us seems impossible? And we realize we have someone right here saying, I'm going to help you. I didn't ask you to do it by yourself. I'm going to help you do it. I'm going to be here with you. I'm going to teach you. I'm going to lead you. I'm going to guide you. I'm going to whatever I can to get you through this. But if we're busy looking for excuses rather than listening to the instruction, we don't hear that part. We don't hear that part at all, that you're here to show me. God says very, very clearly, I will certainly be with you. So it wasn't, well, how am I going to do this? Or I'm all by myself. That was never true. None of that was ever going to be true. The dread of this task that was before him, the darkness of this moment, it seems impossible, right? We've all faced that. Whether we're dealing with a circumstance in your life right now, maybe you're looking at some type of health issue. Maybe you're dealing with a family matter. Some of the stuff that I know that I've been struggling through lately. We see these things that just seem impossible to deal with. We just can't find answers. But God is saying to you today, he's saying to me today, he's saying to everybody who will listen, I will certainly go with you. He didn't say he was going to promise rainbows and sunshine every day. He didn't say that at all. But he said, I will lead you through the storm. I will get you through there. Isaiah chapter 58 and verse 10, it says this, and if, there's that word again, we always use if, and if you offer yourself to the hungry and satisfy the afflicted one, then your light will shine in the darkness and your night will be like noonday. Will you let me allow you to be a vessel for the work that I've called you to do? He said, if you give me the time, if you give me you, we'll find the time. If you give me you, we'll make a way. And he says, if you give yourself unto the afflicted one, the one that is really struggling, if you can just say good morning, can you find time to do that? Can you find time to maybe give somebody a sandwich if they need it? Whatever the case, he said, your light will shine in the darkness. Think about the beauty of that call on our life. We get a chance in this dark and seemingly ever spiraling out of control world. God is saying, you got a chance to be the light in that. How awesome is that? And this was the task being put before Moses. I've heard my people. I've heard where they are. I've heard their crying. And I know the oppressors that are putting them there. And I'm asking you to go be the light. I'm asking you to go and do something amazing. Difficulty, we need to understand this morning, friends. Difficulty does not worry God. It doesn't. Do we trust him when it involves us, though, participating? Well, I know God can do anything, but I don't know about me. That requires me to trust him if he's called me to go do something, right? Okay, we see in Jeremiah 32 and 27, he says, I am the Lord, the God over every creature. Is anything too difficult for me? Now that's a question we all need to think about. This is what God is saying. He says, I am the Lord. As we'll see him answer Moses here in just a little bit about being I am. The God over every creature, everything. Is there anything too difficult for me? So he's calling. Do we listen or do we make excuses? We look at Moses in verse 11, and Moses says, but who am I? Who am I that I should go? In other words, he's saying, I'm nobody. I'm not anybody important. I don't have a big title. I mean, I don't have any, I don't have any regiment around me. I'm nobody. Have you ever felt that way? I'm just insignificant. I don't have any ability to make a change. I don't have any ability to do anything that's important because I'm nobody noble or notable, or I don't have some name on the marquee or whatever. That's not who God's asking for. He's asking for your heart. Will you just go? Will you just go? That's all he's saying. I'm nobody is what Moses is thinking. Why would you pick me? I mean, who am I that anybody would listen to me? I thought that the very first time I ever stood behind a desk or a table or anything else. I remember my very first Sunday. I had been asked by my mentor, my pastor at the time, to teach a class. It was my first foray into speaking, right? So man, I spent 2 weeks just writing and preparing and getting ready. And there was one person that showed up in the classroom. And I'm thinking, well, that's a little defeating for your, for your excitement. And the guy was like, well, what are we going to do? I said, I don't know, but I got a lot of notes and you got an hour. So you're going to hear everything I got, right? And so, but sometimes it's difficult because we don't think, well, who would listen to me? Who would care? Who would care? Who would listen to me? Self-confidence, without a question, in my almost 55 years of living, self-confidence has been my absolute toughest opponent. I have wrestled with it and fought it since the first grade. I've never believed in me because of different reasons and circumstances that I won't get into. It was the hardest fight I have ever fought. And if I'm honest with you, I still fight it every time. Every time. And it's not a vain thing. It's just, I want to give my very best. I don't ever want to let down God. I want when everybody leaves, regardless of what we've talked about, that everybody says, wow. Not that was great or any great compliments or nothing like that, but that it made a difference, that there was something significant about that. I really, really still wrestle with that. And everybody does to some degree. But what I have determined is this, and I really, really, just in the last few years, have really adopted this and lived by this. It's not me, but it's he who lives in me. And if we will begin to embrace that, if we will begin to hold on to that, there's nothing we can't do. And I mean absolutely nothing. I have now had the opportunity to speak in places around the world, whether it's in 50 people or whether it's 5,000 people. I've seen some awesome stuff. But the question is, will I let him? Will I let him, or will I continue to make excuses as to why not? Moses was much like what we do, okay? He was immediately looking for every reason not to go. I'm busy. I'm too old. It's too far. It's too hard. I can't. They're not going to listen to me. I'm not important enough. We can almost picture, if you will, if you want to get a picture in your mind, we can almost picture God standing there with his arms crossed, just waiting until Moses gets done and says, okay, are you finished? Are you finished? Like a parent and a child that's having a hissy fit, right? Are you finished? I love the episode of the Andy Griffith Show where Opie has met the spoiled rich kid in town, and he's decided he needs to start testing the waters to see how. And he's laying in front of the desk just having a temper tantrum. And Andy looks at him and says, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm having a fit and I can't stop." He says, "Okay, well let me know when you're done, but don't get your clothes dirty." I love that because that's what God is saying. Okay, are you done? Because I hadn't got started yet. Listen to me. Yes. I ask you to go. This is what he tells Moses. I ask you to go. But he says in verse 12, I am going to go with you. I will certainly be with you. You will not be alone. In other words, no excuses needed. Just go. Sometimes we need to hear that, don't we? Sometimes we need to hear, I can't, and all this and all that, because we'll talk ourselves out of it. And it doesn't matter what it is. It could be something small. It could be something massive. It doesn't matter what it is. But the fact of it is, will you try? Because you'll never know till you try. Never. It could be a task that you've never done before, but it may find that just a talent that you didn't know you had. It could be all kinds of different things. So then, who is the issue when the call comes? Us or God? I think we know the answer, right? Because he's not the one saying, I want you to find every reason not to. He's telling us, I need you to go with me. Most of us, at some point in time in life, regardless of what it is, maybe we've been in some type of service. Maybe some of you are now. Maybe it's whether it could be medical, it could be fitness, it could be spiritual, it could be a million different things that we have opportunities to do in this life, flying planes, whatever the case. And there may be a point in time where we wrestle with the fact of whether we are unqualified. We just don't really have. We don't think we've got what it takes. But consider this for a moment. Consider a task for God. Do we consider this a task for God? And then the stakes are even higher, and we start to think, well, I can't do that. It's just too much. It's just too hard. And then the I can'ts start rolling in, and then oh no, that's me. I can't. That starts flying out of our mouth like a hit song. You know, we find every reason in the world why we can't. But I want you to stop for a moment. I want you to stop for a moment. I want you to read through Scripture. Who did God give the assignments to that would not just change, but that would save the world? Broken people just like me and you. That's who he called. That's who he put forth before others, because that's who you're going to listen to. Let me tell you something, being on, not just on this side of the desk, but on the other side of the table and everything else that I've had the opportunity to meet with and counsel with people over the years. Excuse me, my nose is a little athletic this morning and won't stop running. But we think about when you can have a conversation with someone and you have a kindred spirit, not because you know each other, but because you've been through the same experience, you can talk to them. When you're dealing with someone that you've never been down that road, you have no idea what it means to be an addict, or you have no idea what it means to this, that. You can show compassion, but you don't know. You don't know. But if you've been there, you can talk to one another. When we look at the characters of the Bible, when we look at the different broken people that God placed in positions, not only of authority and power, but even greater in positions to make a difference. You know, Moses was, okay, he's 80 years old. What does he know? A lot. Some of the greatest wisdom I ever got was from my grandfather. You know, he made it on up into his 90s. You know, I mean, it was an amazing thing, even as a young person listening to his analogies of life. Some of them which I cannot share with you here from the pulpit, but they were, regardless, they were colorful, but they were real, and they were from the heart. And sometimes we need that. Sometimes we just need to hear it. So when we think of brokenness, when we think of that, sometimes it's difficult. But then when we realize, wait a minute, I was recording this past Thursday for our show that comes out tomorrow, Coffee with the Pastor. It comes out at 2:00 every Monday, and I was speaking with the guy that was on the air with me, and we were talking about the value of reading the Bible, the value of really understanding Scripture. And he mentioned, he said, you know, some really, really wrestle with that because they think that they can't understand it, or they think they've got to have some advanced, degree from here or there, for some massive university to understand it. And I said, well, when we grasp the truth that none of the ones who wrote it had one, then we began to look at it a little differently, right? We began to look, that's just people. God put them in places to tell us stories, to let us see. God told Moses, I need you to go. You're my guy. You're the one I'm counting on. You're the one. And immediately the excuses started. Isn't that what happens to us too? I can't do this, I can't do that, I'm too old, or I'm too far gone, or I'm not, whatever, all these. But God made it clear. It had nothing to do with time. It had nothing to do with age. It had nothing to do with difficulty or anything else. It's all about the willingness to trust Him. And that's all he's telling us today. Whatever I will put in front of you, it may seem impossible. You're looking at it as, is this Mount Everest? I can't do that. It's Goliath. I could never fight that. But God is saying, but I will go with you. I will go with you. There's nothing we can't do. He told Moses, I will be with you. In verse 13, it goes on and says that Moses asked God, if I go, so if I accept this and I'll go, and I go to them and I'll say, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. Now, where does that come from? We go back to the very beginning when God introduced himself to Moses. He says, I am the God of your father. So he says, if that's who I say is sending me to them, they're going to ask me your name. What should I tell them? God replies to Moses, I am who I am. Those of you that, and again, I introduced this last week, so we just recently watched the 10 Commandments. You know, you've seen that scene and that big voice, coming out, I am who I am. We think about that in powerful moment. He says, this is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. I love that. When we consider later on the words of Jesus as he would proclaim himself as I am, what did we see in his answers of I am? He's the answer to everything. And this is what God is saying. I am. I am every answer you need. I am every call that you need. I am every strength that you need. Jesus would say the same thing. I am the bread of life. I am the door. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the good shepherd. I am the Alpha and the Omega. In other words, if God calls us, we have no excuse because of who he is. Can we believe that today? He says, I am everything that you need if you just trust me. That's really what it comes down to. That's the power of this. We should have no doubts. Now, I know that's easier said than done. Don't get me wrong. I've been there, and I still fight it just like everybody else. But do we listen or do we make excuses? Because excuses become habits after a while. We instantly gravitate toward that. But a friend of mine, and you'll get to meet him in a few weeks, Nikita Koloff, he and I were ministering together several years ago, and he said something profound that I'll always remember. He said, an excuse is asking permission to lie. And sometimes that's true. Sometimes that's true. And this is the beauty of what's he saying here. Do we listen to what God is asking us to do? Prayerfully after today, after just these few moments together, I pray that one side of that question will get a little stronger. That we'll realize I can trust him because of who he is. Just like in that last song, Jesus Messiah, think about that, what that word means. Saved. He came to save me. Is the one who saved me not capable of taking care of me? Is the one who saved me not capable of asking me to go and do something and I have the ability to do it? Think about that today, friends. If you're doubting your ability today, whatever it may be, strength, time, understanding, intelligence, and so I want you to think about it this way. Some of you have probably seen these kind of lists before, but I'm just going to read just a few of these and just to put it into perspective, right? Jacob was a cheater. Peter had a temper. David had an affair. Noah got drunk. Jonah ran away. Paul was a murderer. Thomas doubted. Sarah laughed at God when he told her at 90 years old she was going to have a baby. Most of you ladies would too, right? At 90 years old. Rosa's giving Gurney the side eye up here. Moses stuttered. Abraham was old and Lazarus was dead. There's nothing God can't call us to do that he doesn't equip us to do. Can we believe that today? We all have a role, friends, every single one of us. Will we answer the call? Will we answer the call? Or will we make an excuse? That's a challenge for us today, isn't it? Thank you so much for being here. It is such an honor to share this time with you each and every week. It's just the joy of everything that I have, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Father, we thank you.